Hi, this is Rochelle with Live in Vibrancy, and today I want to talk a little about why I tell people to embrace what it is that they don't want, especially when they're creating something but have resistance to something in their experience. So, the only thing between you and what you want is your resistance, right? This is it right here. So these are the feelings and the emotions and the stories that you connect to them. And you created your resistance at some point in your life to keep you safe. So, for example, to kind of make sense of what I mean by this, let's say you are in grade 5 and your teacher, you raise your hand to answer a question, but you get the question wrong. And so your teacher embarrasses you in front of the entire class, and maybe they even demean you a little. And so your response then is to never raise your hand, and then that can spill over into believing that you're not good enough to know the answer. And then that can spill over into never putting yourself in a position to answer a question and potentially be wrong, because that original experience was so emotionally traumatic for you in the moment. The way that you respond is to create this, essentially it's like a protection identity. And so this protection identity steps in whenever there is the opportunity for you to ever have an experience that is similar to that, in which you could be berated and embarrassed and demeaned in front of a group of people. And so each time you can't put yourself, no matter how old you are, you put yourself into that position, then this version of you would step in and would essentially shy away from ever raising your hand or basically putting yourself in that position. And so it often exists in your unconscious. We are not necessarily aware of it. If you begin to become aware of all the times that you avoid things, and you'll know because you have like fear or some sort of negative emotion, and that's often when these essentially protection identities pop in. And you identify with them because they in essence are you, but they are a version of you that wants something different. So rather than being able to help your team at work, they want you to stay safe. So they will cause you to be quiet in the meeting, or what have you. For some people that may show up as in a relationship, they will people please. Because that's how they stay safe. That's how they stop themselves from being berated, is that they people please. So, as I said, it often exists in your unconscious, and you can also have the emotions that drive you into these behaviors. You can have inherited this. We do know that you inherit emotions, particularly traumatic ones, and those, in essence, all these emotions, these habituated ways of being, essentially create who you are as a person. So each time this happens, I always respond this way. Each time that happens, I always respond that way. And so that essentially becomes who we are. This is our personality. So I've spoken about inherited energy in another video, and I've included a link to that video in the description. So there's a number of ways resistance can pop up. But you can usually identify it by the feelings you have in your body. So I've spoken about this before. When I first started making videos, because I have primarily always operated my business offline. So when I first started making videos, this is a dangerous space for me because I definitely have a protection personality. So each time that I move into another version of talking to people about creating, I used to have this identity step in, and it still does. And so I use these tools, but basically, I would start to feel like a heaviness in my body that really would make it so that if I did not move through that tension, and this is the DIY version, I actually used the reconsolidation moment because you can, neuroplasticity shows that you can actually rewire your brain so that you're not experiencing things from these painful emotions. And so I'm not going to lie, I cheated and I used that. But before I discovered that and used that, I would move through the tension. And the thing about tension is, and this is important to know, so I would push, 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 and make, say, 5 videos in a row. And then by day 6, I would feel like an exhaustion. And so I would just go to bed and I would sleep and sleep and sleep, and I wouldn't make a video. And I would give myself a day or 2 off, and then I would go back and I would start again. And I kind of kept going in this cycle, but it stopped me from really getting the momentum that I wanted. And so this is essentially self-sabotage. And so as I said, I would, so the best way to have addressed that was to, rather than making pushing all the way through, because now I'm creating enough pain in my body and my mental experience that I pull away from it because I don't want to do it. And that's where those days of like just taking a break from it and completely avoiding it would come from. And so the best way, if you're going to DIY your tension, is to basically take little steps. So you're going to do things daily to expand outside of your comfort zone. But I'm off topic. So yeah, today, so anyway, there's a number of ways that your resistance can pop up, and you can identify it, as I said, by the feelings that you have in your body. Maybe it's a heaviness, maybe it's a sadness, maybe, it's like that explosive burning that comes with anger or resentment. And so today I'm going to talk specifically about how misconceptions in your identity, so for example, unconsciously feeling like you're not enough, are a form of resistance. So I want to be clear, you are already enough. There's absolutely no possible way to be more enough than you already are. It's only the thinking and the feeling and the acting from the misconception that you're not enough that's created the life that you're currently experiencing, because you have created this life from your state of being, and in some aspects of your life, there is a reflection. If you are not getting the results that you want, then you have a sense of not enough in some ways, and not enough shows up in a lot of ways. So I'm not enough to do it correctly. I'm not enough as in I don't know enough to do it. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but you get the point. So some of that sense of not enough comes from belief structures in your life that you've accepted and you've never challenged. So we live in these belief structures and we take them as true. They often come from outside of us. We either observe them in others, or they are common beliefs in society, or maybe in amongst our family. So for example, one that I had for a long time was, you have to do well in school to get into university. Not true. I was a solid D, C, student all the way up to graduating high school. And then I was an honors student in university. And the difference was that my identity had changed by the time I went to university, because I didn't go right out of high school. I went more than 10 years later, after I had graduated high school, when I was ready, when I wanted to go, when it was something I wanted to do. And so the result of that was my identity had changed. Before, I identified as someone who didn't do well in school. And by the time I went to university, I had changed what was true for me and the way that I saw myself. So your entire identity is based on a collection of belief structures, the do's and the don'ts of life, which actually can create more resistance than they help. So they are the ways that you define what makes you good or bad, or worthy or not worthy. And so you can be creating your own resistance through the belief structures that you accept. Some are obvious, and then some are more subtle. So let's say I have this belief that life is hard. Then I would experience my own life as hard. And because the unconscious mind is always looking to prove your beliefs right, your focus will be set to notice all the ways that your life is hard, and you're going to continue it's going to continue driving you to perceive life as difficult and to choose people, events, and reactions that further create a life that you can perceive as hard. And so this is a very obvious point of resistance. So if you are someone who believes that life is hard, I would suggest that you begin to really deconstruct those beliefs in order to have a life that's easier. So other obvious resistance comes in the shapes of shoulds. So he or she should do this, he or she should feel this way, he or she should think this way, he or she should be this way. And then when they don't, a lot of resistance comes up. For example, maybe your partner's spending a lot of time with friends and you aren't seeing him or her as much as you want. And so really, you want them to spend time with you. You're a couple and your box of shoulds creates resistance to your partner having any interests or desire of his or her own that go against your current basically shoulds for the relationship. And so this really, when you are creating something, this really has the potential to torpedo your progress. I see that this kind of can derail people quite often because then they have these expectations, and they are expectations of how it should go. And so expectation of receiving it is different than expectation of how to receive it. And so it's because this belief will set your subtle focus on what isn't happening because you've decided how it should go and you start to sort of plot it out in your mind. And so that can quickly move you into a more subtle way that identity creates resistance. Because your partner isn't fitting into your box of how things should be in the relationship. They didn't invite you maybe, and that creates resistance, which is that feeling in your body. And then your mind has to give that feeling a reason. And so it connects your partner going out with friends and not inviting you to how things should be. And because they aren't aligned, you create a meaning. It doesn't fit the loving relationship box. So it must fit into the rejection box. And so if you follow this down, once your relationship or once your partner is in the rejection box, you follow this down and you can ask yourself, what do I have to feel rejected right now? And then it would be my partner doesn't love me, I'm not important to them, or whatever that is. So what do I have to believe to feel that my partner doesn't love me or that I'm not important to them? That I'm not good enough or something along those lines. And so now you can see that this identity of not good enough will keep that relationship out of reach, or it's going to keep it yo-yoing between good and bad. So now that we know that there's resistance to having the relationship you want, simply by having the identity of I'm not good enough, right? Because the minute you have an identity of I'm not good enough, even though it's unconscious, you are going to feel, think, and act in subtle ways that will cause you to prove this true because that is who you are. So you need to create that life. And so often the protection mechanism that we use when someone isn't fitting the belief box is that we judge them. And so judgment's a bit of a double-edged sword. Not only do we get to keep what we judge, but when you judge something, your unconscious mind will keep you away from it because you've determined that it's bad. And so as an aside, for those of you that may have a third party in your life, I want you to think about the two aspects of judgment that I just spoke about and how judging that third party may be actually keeping them in your active experience. So that's over and above the beliefs that stewing about a third party implies, right? So think about what that you would have to believe in order to really get wrapped up in that. And then the fact that if you were in your end, I'm guessing there would be no third party to have an emotional reaction to. So to create no third party, you want to let go of that judgment, right? And so kind of flipping back to the two ways that I talked about, often we get to keep it. So if you're judging it, you get to keep it. And another way, and then the other thing being that the things that you judge, your mind, your unconscious mind, which does not operate off reason or logic, will deem that as bad. So if the person you want to be with is with someone else and you are judging that someone else, your mind is associating that being the partner to the person you want to be with is bad because that is who they are right now. And so by judging them, you have deemed them bad. And so you thus push yourself away from being in their place. So back to judgment. And not only can it keep you stuck, but it may cause you to limit yourself from doing things like visiting your own friends, because relationships are supposed to be a certain way in your mind. And so that's actually a high level of deflection. So it moves us from not feeling enough, or at least from not looking at the fact that we feel enough, into a false sense of superiority. But what we judge, we're resisting. So we get to keep it, and it often expands. And so the actual way out of this is to understand that when you feel triggered by other people, it's often a projection, or it is a reflection of past emotional experiences. So there are two ways that you can look at this. So if it is potentially a projection, you can use Alyssa Nabriga's tools and ask yourself the I am, I could, I wish questions. Where in my life am I doing this and unconsciously judging myself? Could I fulfill my own needs and spend time with my own friends, or spend time doing something that I enjoy, rather than putting the responsibility of my joy and entertainment onto my partner? Do I wish I could do this? Maybe I'm holding myself back from spending time with friends because I'm limiting myself to an unsupportive belief structure. And so additionally, if you find that it doesn't fit into any of those, then maybe the feelings that you're looking at, you can also identify where they come from or what they are that you are seeing by using the 7 ASEAN mirrors of relationship. And I have those. I will also add a link to that playlist in the description. So identifying which it is, and then fulfilling that need in yourself, or processing out that emotion, not only releases the resistance, but it eliminates that I'm not good enough from the situation, which then allows the energy to change. And so often when you do that, the situation can resolve itself. So for example, your partner is out spending time with friends and you feel a certain way about it. And then you recognize that it is that you are operating inside of a belief structure, and you're limiting the amount of time you're spending with your friends, or you're making it about that they don't care about you, when really perhaps it's an old wound, maybe from school where you were excluded, and so at this point it has triggered that emotion, and your mind makes the connection, and it's that you're not important. And it's really just, it's not about you at all. It's really just bringing up the message of this old emotional experience. And then, so when we see this allows the energy to change, because we can then challenge these beliefs. Is it true they don't care about me? And then you can go through your life and find examples of all the reasons that they do. And so this allows you to begin to reset the belief, and you're actually working with your reticular activating system to change those beliefs. And so this, once the lesson's been resolved, there's often no resistance. In this case, the mistaken identity of I'm not enough. And so because when you change your energy, you can source your own joy, you become magnetic to anything that isn't bolted to the floor. So tomorrow I will be discussing a different level of resistance. I'm going to be talking about the resistance that comes up as fear that something will never happen, or that something will happen. So until then, please like, share, and subscribe. And I always forget to tell you to hit the little bell so you get notified when I put out new videos. But hit the little bell. And until tomorrow, act as though you can't fail.